you to know what services they had available, because I think it's really, really useful for people that want to start a business. But like they say, it's $20, you can go as often as you like. I had one guy, he'd come in twice a week, virtually every week. And then I'd have other people that would come in once or twice, and you would see them again, they start a business. And you'll find those of you that ever linked with me on LinkedIn, quite a few of those people are ex-clients from Yes who started a business and were very successful in it. So Yes is a really good resource in terms of guidance, mentoring, workshops, etc. For information, then I would say Yes Agro Entrepreneur, which is the one that's linked with the Chamber of Commerce. And that's a really, really good source of information, including their staff. Like I say to you, you can email their staff and they'll do some of the research for you. Today I'm going to talk about feasibility studies, business plans, and the alternative to business plans. On account of how, as I think I mentioned before, Louis-Jacques Fillion and Claude Ananou, they wrote this book which underpins this class business plans in the French stream of the HEC program. And it's from this book that I did the translation of Identification of Need. So I'm just going to talk to you later on about the potential alternatives to a business plan. And then at least those of you that go on to do the business plan course, you're kind of up to speed. I'm not sure on the English program whether they're going to get into the alternative or stick to the mainstream business plan, but at least you're aware of its existence. And you can be provocative and ask extra questions about it. So, and let's start with feasibility studies. When you've got a business idea, you really need to understand if it's an opportunity or whether it's just an idea. And also, if you're working in a company, for those of you that are not going to start your own business, if you're working in a company, your boss might come along and say, hey, I've got a really great idea. Imagine you're working for Meridian Hotels, and they think that it would be a fabulous idea to go and build a hotel in the middle of the jungle of the Amazon. Well, I think we need to do a bit of a feasibility study here. Feasibility studies, it's really where you're going to see whether the business will generate enough cash flow and profits, whether it will cope with the risks that it will encounter. Is it going to be viable in the long term? Is it going to meet the goals of the shareholders, of the owners of the business? And you're really checking out whether it's a viable idea. Now, you may be checking whether it's a viable idea from a technical point of view. You may be checking from a commercial point of view. Is there a market for this? Checking from a financial point of view. Or you may be doing all three in a full-blown feasibility study. The technical feasibility would be more looking at the legal and regulatory issues. Can we chop down some trees in the Amazon jungle and build our hotel there? Can we build an airport? Is that location feasible? In the sense that, yes, we can, there's no legal constraints, but are we actually near to airports where people can arrive? Is there going to be roads to get them there? Is there electricity when they get there? So you're looking at the technical realities or potential problems. The equipment, raw materials that you'll need. So that's applicable even if you're not going to start your own business, even if you're going to be working in a company. You know, if you're working in a company where you're responsible for the strategic development of that company or the business development, and not in a sales sense, but in the sense of how we're going to grow this company, be it organically, through mergers and acquisitions, whatever, you may well need to do a full-blown feasibility study, or at least look at the technical aspects, or the commercial aspects, or the financial aspects. So on the commercial market feasibility, this is more the part where a lot of your sector note would fit in. Because you're going to be defining the sector, you're going to be doing your pastel analysis, and you're going to look at how the market works, so the good old Porter's analysis. Is there a demand for the products and services? What's the size of the market? Who are the competitors within that market? What's the level of competition, the level of rivalry? So a lot of what you would have done on a sector note, so if tomorrow you had to go and do a feasibility study, your sector note would fit nicely in this, and some of your pastel analysis might address some of the legal and technical issues. And then, of course, there's the good old financial feasibility. So how much money am I going to have to actually invest in this business? Do I have access to that level of investment? What's the payback period? A lot of corporate companies will actually require you to meet an internal rate of return. So you might calculate the net present value over, say, 10 years, maybe 15 years. And you'll calculate the internal rate of return, and they will have a target that you need to meet. When I worked in mergers and acquisitions for Thomas Cook's, we were owned at that time by Midland Bank, and then by the Deutsches Landesbank, and they would set an internal rate of return that we had to achieve. Unfortunately, of course, they were banks, so it was a banking internal rate of return, which was rather a high hurdle to leap over, given that we were a travel company. So that was always a bit of a challenge. But you need to look at your cash flow as well. I would say cash flow is over 1 or 2 years. A lot of organisations will ask for cash flow over 3 years. I'm not too sure how you can look into a crystal ball and see over 3 years, but at least for the first year, do your cash flow. Cash flow is going to be money coming in and money physically going out. So, for example, I might do a contract tomorrow for Rio Tinto and earn $10,000. They might not pay me until September. Meanwhile, I've maybe outsourced some of that and I need to pay those people. Yeah.
So the cash flow is directly related to the estimated sales volume. Like it's based on the forecast, right?
Well, you're going to you'll have decided what your selling price is going to be. You're predicting what volume you're going to sell at, and then you're going to predict at what point you're going to get paid. Now, if you're stocking a shop, you're going to be paying out for those goods perhaps in advance, because at this stage of starting a company, the supplier may not give you credit. So if you're a newcomer, you may not get any credit. So that money's going to go out now, and then it comes into the stock comes into the shop, but your customers might take 2 or 3 months to actually start buying, and that's when the cash comes in. Yeah.
Is there like a risk analysis that fits into the feasibility study? Did you actually?
Well, when I worked for Thomas Cook's in Mergers and Acquisitions, we actually use a software program at risk. And then you can attach certain probabilities to determine if this happens, what would the outcome be. But that's quite, it's quite complex maths. And so you can actually use software to actually make those calculations for you. Did you do that on your finance courses? Looking at some risk analysis?
A bit.
Yeah. If you ever get into it in detail, At Risk is a good software program to use. And it may well now be available as an open source program. I'm not sure. I know there's a lot of open source out there. So, for example, if you want to, instead of buying Microsoft Project, you can get an open source version of it, which is just as good. So, At Risk, you may be able to get it as an open source software. You need kind of to know what you're doing with it. You need to be reasonably good at maths and understand various types of probability that you can apply. It's not something to use, because you need then to interpret the consequences, you need to interpret the outcome of it. So you need to know why you've used that particular probability in a particular circumstance. Please don't ask me to elaborate, because it's 10 years since I did it.
No, I was thinking something a little more along the lines of, like estimated sales volume. It's an emerging sector, if you will, and there's no numbers out there. So you could do like a pessimistic, optimistic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
along those lines, because it seems very generic, like estimated sales volume. But then you can.
Sure. I would do various scenarios, and I personally always use this as a spreadsheet, and I always make sure that it's formula driven. I don't know whether anybody's ever talked to you about this, but whenever I do any financial analysis using Excel, I will have a sheet that is purely my formulae. So I would have like inflation, how many years I'm going to discount it over, what I think my sales figures will be in years 1, 2, and 3, what my alternative sales figures would be, and then I'm using formulas on the other pages, grabbing the numbers from there. So you could come along and say, but do you really think that inflation's going to run at 2%? Suppose it runs at 3%. I've only got to change one figure. I change the 2 for a 3, and then I can see what the outcome is on my calculations for cash flow, from a net present value, etc. And that